This is the Steel Astra by Thomas Balisong. This balisong is only $20, which is absolutely crazy in the balisong space. But how well does it flip? And who would I recommend it to? Well, that's what we're gonna get into in this video. These are my very first impressions. I have had this for a couple days, and so I've been able to flip it and gather some thoughts on it. In this video, what I wanna focus on is how does this actually feel in the hand to flip, and who would this balisong be for, or just really my recommendations in general, because all the little nuances of the design aren't really as important because it's only $20. So you're either, if you're in the hobby, you're gonna like this and you're gonna wanna pick one up to try it for yourself because hey, it's only $20 for a balisong, that's pretty good. Sure, I'll try it. Or if you are somebody that is looking for their first balisong, you're wondering, hey, should I go for this $20 balisong or should I go for something that's twice as expensive, or maybe 3 or 4 times the price? So that's what I'm gonna answer today. So I wanted to start off with the thing that stuck out the most to me when I first picked this up, which is the handle thickness, or rather the handle thinness. These slabs are extremely thin. It's because, if you don't know, balisongs are typically made with either titanium or nowadays aluminum. And steel is much more dense than both of those materials. And so because of that, if you have the same design, it's going to be way too heavy. And that is actually something interesting about this balisong. If you don't know, Thomas Balisong has a titanium balisong called the Astra, which this design is basically taken that design but it's adapted it for the stainless steel format. That's why I went from a sandwich titanium design into this, now using these incredibly thin stainless steel sandwich design. And so that just stood out to me because, I'm so used to most designs that I have just have a lot more actual handle, between these two spaces. And so it feels really like there's like just 2 distinct lines of metal there. And so anything that I do, any tricks that I'm doing where it's like that, where I'm holding the balisong, feeling the sides of the handles, it definitely feels very weird in the hand. Something you can get used to and you can flip totally fine with. It just feels different. But the faces feel really nice and pretty normal. Of course, there's other sandwich balisongs, take the Orion, but the gap in between the handles definitely feels less pronounced. So it feels more like a solid handle that just has like a very big cutout along it. As opposed to with the Steel Astra, it just feels like there's 2 slabs that I'm holding on to. So definitely unique and different. Another thing that stuck out to me on this design is the weight. Now this comes in at 4.66 ounces, which if you are in the balisong hobby, you know that is definitely on the heavier side for modern balisongs. Of course, it's due to its all steel construction, but if you're new to balisongs and don't know, a heavier weight or lighter weight, it's not going to impact whether or not you can do certain tricks. It's more so just how much it will fatigue your fingers. And so this balisong, because it's heavier, it is just gonna be more tiring on your fingers. So the weight doesn't really hold me back in any way. It's just going to be a little bit more tiring overall. Not only is the overall weight important, but how it's distributed across the balisong is also extremely important. When you're spinning a balisong around, you're not just holding it in your hand. It's not like you're just like lifting it up and down, You're actually guiding it through like these different motions and, flinging it around. And so the way that the weight is distributed matters a ton. Because the further away from, the pivots the weight is, that's the further like the distance it's going to travel, and the harder it is going to be to kind of like start and stop that movement. So if you do something like ricochets where you're going back and forth like with the twirl, or if you're doing, any kind of like fan tricks where you have to start and then stop the fan, you're going to feel the weight at the ends of the handles more, in addition to how much weight is distributed on the handles versus the blade. That's really gonna matter for like rollovers, our whole style of tricks where you're kind of, rolling the balisong over your fingers. Another one would be like chaplains, where it's kind of like you're doing, you're rolling it over your finger over and over and over again. And of course you can do those in lots of different ways. And then you have other tricks like fan tricks, which is where, you're spinning one handle and the blade around, and there's a bunch of fan tricks that you can do as well. And so with these different types of tricks, the way that balisongs are balanced is going to affect it a lot. Now you have handle bias, which means there's relatively more weight in the handles than in the blade, and blade bias, which means there's more weight in the blade than the handles, and neutral somewhere in the middle where the weight is evenly balanced, where you wouldn't say, oh yeah, this is definitely handle bias or this is definitely blade bias. Typically, blade bias helps with fans because the blade can balance out the handle as it's spinning. Handle bias helps out with your rollovers and your chaplains. Now, all that being said, this balisong is pretty neutral. It's really well balanced. This balisong performs really well in fans. It just feels really well balanced, and it's not very difficult to get into those fans. And when I'm in the fan, it just flows through the trick really fluidly, which is nice. And additionally to that, I find that rollovers also feel really good on this balisong. It doesn't feel like it wants to fly away from my fingers. And additionally, chaplains feel really sticky, meaning, once again, the balisong does not want to fly away from my finger. So this balisong is really well balanced. While it is on the heavier end, because it does feel nice and neutral, there's no trick that it struggles with. In some sense, it mitigates some of that heaviness because I can really flow through really any trick I throw at it. It's going to flow and just continue that momentum. Now, there is also something to consider, which is the ricochets. That's the only thing where the weight I feel like is more noticeable, especially, because I wouldn't say that this balisong carries a ton of momentum at the ends of the handles, but once again, it's just heavier, and so you have these big steel weights at the end and the pivots. Though you do feel that with tricks like the twirl. So that's where I would say the heaviness of the balisong is definitely the most noticeable, is with those ricochet tricks. So depending on your style, you may find that this balisong feels heavier because if your style does involve a lot more, quick changes in momentum, and you do twirls and like these ricochets a lot, you're going to feel that a lot more than if you have a style that's more focused on rollovers and fans and just kind of keeping the balisong moving in one direction. Because I do find that, if I try to do combos that focus more on that fluid movement, that this balisong actually feels pretty nimble and light comparatively to when if I do a combo that has a lot of ricochets going back and forth, then I feel like this balisong definitely feels a lot heavier and you really feel that weight more. All that to say, I think that if you are a beginner, there's a good chance that this balisong will feel heavier because as you're still, even with rollovers, as you're learning how to do these tricks and with fans, of course, you're not going to be able to execute these tricks really cleanly. And so you're going to be struggling a little bit more to get that flow. And you might find that the balisong feels heavier to you. Then say if somebody that is a more experienced flipper picks up this balisong, it kind of plays into the fact that it can do these more flowy tricks pretty effortlessly. They might find that, oh, this balisong doesn't feel that heavy because they can kind of, work with its strengths and kind of play into the fact that it can kind of do these flowy combos without much difficulty. Now, a couple of quick things before I dive into who I would recommend this balisong to. Number one is that the tune. So this balisong, it's one of the few balisongs that I am going to beat. Now, I've only dropped it on concrete just a handful of times, but it does already have tap. Now, the blade is fairly thick, though it's not that much thicker than other blades. I think it's just because there's really no rounding on it. It's just like a flat piece of metal that it looks extra thick, but maybe that's why it's tapping. But once again, this balisong is $20, so I mean, I really don't care. Though I was almost like a little surprised just because Thomas Balisong just has really good tunes, but it's whatever. It's $20. Another thing is the washers are so thick. I'm assuming it's just because the handles are just so thin. They're just kind of used as spacers to just get the right spacing on that. Doesn't really matter other than that, but I thought it was interesting. And this balisong comes in this nice box and has spare hardware, and it comes with enough to completely swap out all of the hardware besides just like the barrel spacers and these end pins. So that's really cool to see. Even at such a low price point, you have that spare hardware. So you can also, if you wanted to, you could practice tuning this, or if you find that, maybe if you beat it a lot and it needs to be retuned, you can do that. So that's pretty cool. Quickly, I just want to talk about comfort. Overall, this balisong is actually pretty comfortable. It really doesn't have any problems with it. There's no sharp edges or any corners that when I'm flipping it feel uncomfortable. The biggest thing is just the fact that this sandwich gap between these two slabs is just so wide and it's just very noticeable. But it's not like uncomfortable, like it's not sharp. The only thing that I did notice is when rubbing my finger on it just to see if there's any sharp spots, like the inside of here is a little sharp. But while flipping, I haven't felt it at all. And I don't think it would be an issue for most people. The spine is very flat, but these edges aren't really sharp, so that's fine. Feels comfortable during chaplains to me. And there is a bite handle indicator, which I love to see. You can definitely feel it during chaplains. During ricochets, it's harder to feel, so you might not really notice if you do a twirl on the wrong side, if you're just completely not paying attention. But overall, it's pretty comfortable, so I like that. I shared all that because I'm sure a lot of you are curious about all those little details, and I could get into way more details. But ultimately, all I really need to say is that yes, this balisong passes the baseline for is it good at flipping? Is it flippable? You know, there's no big glaring issues that, you know, make it suffer in any category of tricks or make it unflippable, which, you know, that's what we've kind of just come to expect and to see as being, you know, the baseline and the bare minimum for balisongs now today in this modern era. You know, from all of the well-known companies, they all pretty much make balisongs that, yeah, they pass that baseline flippable test. What makes a balisong a really good balisong or a great balisong to people is, well, what are their specific preferences and does it match those? Like, do they like a lighter balisong? Do they like a heavier one? Do they like one with more momentum that handles less? And on and on. But this thing is only $20, and I think the large part of the conversation on this balisong will be about, you know, who is this balisong good for? And will this be a good entry point, or will it maybe hinder some people's, you know, beginners' progress, or will it, you know, give them bad habits and all of that kind of stuff? So that is what I'm going to get into next. So obviously, your personal preferences are going to have the biggest impact on, you know, whether or not you would like this balisong. But of course, everyone's preferences are different. What they're looking for in that next balisong purchase and what's in their current collection, all of that is going to have an important impact, and that's going to change. So obviously, I can't really speak to all of that. If you have specific questions, feel free to drop a comment below, and I can do my best to answer it. And the more context you give, the better answer I can give. In addition to all of that, new balisongs entering the market is going to change, you know, recommendations that people are going to give. And so just keep in mind that, you know, I'm posting this video at this point in time based off of what exists in the market right now. And that may change in a week or a year, and I'm sure it will change in a year. But all that to say, I'm gonna go through my recommendations for different categories of people, starting with the easier, less nuanced ones, and then working my way down. Starting with what's easiest. If you are a more experienced balisong flipper and collector, you know your way around balisongs, then, I mean, this thing's $20 and it's made by, you know, a well-known company, Thomas Balisong. You already know if you want to get this or not. It's $20, you can totally go for it. Could be a fun beater, something to do mods with. Enough said. If you're somebody that has, maybe you're a beginner or you just don't flip a lot and you have a couple of balisongs, like maybe one or two already, and you already know some tricks, then I think it really comes down to what balisong you have and what you're looking for. For example, if you're looking for a beater balisong, something that's cheap and durable, then this could be a great option. Especially if you have something already like the Impulse and you don't want to damage it, because it just looks so nice. Then getting something like this, which is really cheap and steel, could be a great choice. Now, if you do have a couple balisongs and you're looking more so like for like an upgrade, or to see if, you know, you want to try out a different weight and balance or something like that, really, I wouldn't recommend this balisong for you. It's not going to be like an upgrade in any sense, most certainly, because, you know, it's just a really cheap balisong. Unless you just want to expand your collection and try something new and you like the look of it, you know, then go for it. But other than that, I would say that your $20 would probably be better spent towards something that's a little bit more expensive and towards something that you would actually flip more. Okay, now for the hardest recommendation category to give, and the one that most people are going to be the most curious about, which is if you're a beginner, if you're somebody that doesn't have any balisongs, you know, maybe you got to try a friend's balisong or made a Lego one or popsicle stick balisong, but essentially beginners, their first balisong. Should this Steel Astra be your first balisong? That's a tough question. Ultimately, just as long as you're getting a first balisong, you're good. You know, you just need something that can flip, something to learn on. And so the fact that this is a fully functioning, well-made, you know, for what it is, $20 balisong, that's fantastic. Especially like if you like the look of this and you really just want to get into the balisong hobby for as cheap as possible, then I think this is your ticket. There are cheaper things in this, like on Amazon. You'll see like these CCCs, you know, this really poor quality. Also steel, but they're just really not well balanced and they will like literally just fall apart on you. Don't get those, even though they might, you know, you can find them for like $6 or something. Skip that, avoid it. Instead, I would go for this if you just want the absolute cheapest thing. But wait, if this thing is just $20, why wouldn't I just give a blanket recommendation to any beginner just to start with this? Well, I guess first of all, for context, what is the price point for other balisongs? At this point in time, the big one really is the Impulse. For the price of, you know, it being around $40, this is just such a solid recommendation to give. I think a big factor for a beginner balisong recommendation when you don't know what a beginner's preferences are going to be is how likely would somebody enjoy just the process of learning tricks on it and just be likely to stay flipping and stay in the hobby. Because obviously if you're giving the recommendation, you can't know people's preferences. And if they're a beginner, they're really not going to have many preferences early on because everything's just going to be so new to them. And even as you do start to build some preferences as a beginner, they're likely going to change a lot due to, you know, you learning different tricks and kind of developing your own style. But the Impulse has been the go-to, just cheapest option recommendation for a lot of people, including myself. It is just beginner friendly in the sense that, you know, it's cheap and it can do all the tricks and it's, you know, it's light, so it's not going to be a strain on your fingers, especially as you're first learning tricks. And so it's just been a very easy go-to recommendation. So the fact that this was so cheap and still somewhat standard with its aluminum construction, it just made it such a good recommendation. But now the Steel Astra has come along and sitting at even lower price point of $20, this now takes the place of being the cheapest balisong that is actually good. So if you're looking for your first balisong, would I recommend this to you? My answer depends on, well, you and what you're looking for. So if you're just looking for something that is just the absolute cheapest that you can get, that's still going to be, you know, flippable and it's not just going to fall apart, then yes, I would say that the Steel Astra is one that you could totally go for. I mean, it is so cheap, and so it could be a great way to get into the hobby, especially like if you're the type of person that, you know, tends to change hobbies and, you know, pick up new ones, you know, every month, depending on, you know, what's been hitting up your social media feeds, then sure, you just want to try out balisong, see if you'd like it, have something you could flip casually, then yeah, this is an easy one to go to. But if you're somebody that's not looking for like necessarily the cheapest thing, and you would rather spend a little bit more if it's going to get you a substantial increase in performance or feel in the hand and just overall just enjoyability, then I would recommend you spending a little bit more. Now for around like $15 more, sure, you could go for the Impulse, but really what I would recommend if you think you're gonna stick with the hobby and you kind of know that you're gonna really like balisong flipping, even though you haven't flipped one, or if you have tried like a friend's and you know you like it, then I would highly recommend spending a little bit more to get something that is really gonna not compromise on its performance. Once you make it around to like the 65 to 85 price range, Nabalis has the Crescent, Cheese, Teflon Volt, LDY has the Kite AL V1.5 and the Orion V2, and Thomas Balisong has the Refall. And all of these balisongs are one that you could buy. They're really not cutting any corners in regards to performance. Obviously, everybody's gonna have their own preferences, but at this price range, you're gonna have more options to choose from for things that you really like the look of. And these are balisongs that you really could just get this one balisong and flip it for years. But yeah, these really don't compromise on anything where it's like, oh yeah, the handle geometry is really weird, or oh, the handles have to be really thin because, you know, that's what makes it cheaper, or there's like nothing weird like that. And of course, the ceiling is very high. You can always spend more on, you know, machining quality, feel in the hand, just specific designs and, you know, different stuff like that. But really, at this price range, if you're somebody that thinks that you're really gonna enjoy balisong flipping, then I would just go for something at this price range. So overall, if you really just wanna get the cheapest possible thing that still flips well, you can totally go with this Steel Astra. But just know, due to the nature of the design being all steel, it does, you know, feel a little bit different than standard. Just know that the possibilities within the balisong space are endless and ever expanding. So if you did pick up one of these and, you know, you wanna try out something else, there's going to be lots of options for you. But if you just want to find something that's just super cheap, because while it might be a little bit heavy and a little bit odd in some ways, this is a $20 balisong that is really good to flip. And if you're very new to flipping and want to see what your first trick to learn is, you should check out this video here. And if you don't have a balisong yet, you want to watch more balisong related content, you can check out this playlist here. Thanks for watching.